Okay, let's begin with a little meditation. Sit comfortably, relax your mind and body. Place your attention in front on your respiration. Remembering this is an exercise we've done many times and how it can begin to calm the mind by focusing on one object, letting go of everything else. See if you can cut the continuity of discursive thoughts by focusing on the respiration. And bring your attention further inward to your mental consciousness. It's useful to imagine it at the center of your chest, about level with your breast, toward the spine, in what's called the heart chakra. And as though withdrawing your attention away from your senses, see if you can bring your attention there, away from the cerebral region, and just observe your mental consciousness. Behind all of the multitude of appearances and thoughts and sensations, feelings, ideas, there is a nature, clear light of the mind, like a vast space, sky. Unobstructed. At first seeing the space between thoughts, hold on that, and eventually, even if thoughts are present, to learn to disengage from them and sense the spaciousness of the mind within which they're arising. Focus on that alone, that clear light nature, letting go of whatever conceptual construction arises. And thinking these teachings that we've been engaging in, that perhaps we've begun to respect and find beneficial for our minds, were taught by the perfect Buddha from his own experience, like the great medical doctor, the great physician, prescribing the Dharma. Simply knowing about the Dharma but not practicing it would be like having a bag of medicine and carrying it on one's back, even though it might cure one. Knowing that the Dharma itself, the medicine of the Dharma, the remedy, can overcome our attachment to this life, to develop, so that we can actually develop within our mind renunciation, can help us overcome our self-cherishing attitude, working for our own liberation, so that we might strive on the Bodhisattva path. The nectar of the Dharma also infusing our mind, opening our wisdom eye, so that we can see the ultimate nature of the self as empty, all phenomena as empty, the ultimate nature of all phenomena, to develop that wisdom through the nectar of the Dharma, the medicine of the Dharma. So cognizant that the people who've practiced these teachings before, like the Sangha, like our fellow practitioners, have put the teachings into practice, showed that they can be accomplished, acting as our nurses in a sense. With the thought to overcome our self-cherishing and self-grasping for the welfare of all living beings, for our own welfare also, to achieve the two aims. In order to achieve that, to better understand the mind, I'm going to listen to the teachings tonight, participate, try to put into practice the medicine of the Dharma so that I can quickly become enlightened, overcoming all my faults, developing all my good qualities, for the welfare of all. And then slowly bring your attention back to the present. It'd be nice in the future, the three things, let's say the 3-point plan. Turn down the thermostat. I think Sister Thea's got too many other things to do now. Turn off the pot. And be quiet if you're coming in. Because if you squeak along the back of the room, it's hard for people to concentrate. Remember some of the points that Rinpa Rinpoche mentioned this last weekend for good concentration? Do you remember, Georgie, what some of the essential points were? You needed to have...
The environment should be a quiet place.
That's the one I'm thinking of, right? So he said, if you don't have these conducive conditions, even, Rinpoche said, even you meditate for eons. What did he say? Hundreds of eons. You can't attain enlightenment. So either people have very good concentration, they don't notice, or they have rather lousy concentration like I, and they don't want to show that they notice. But it's good to try to make, if you can, try to make the conditions the best possible for yourself when you try to do meditation. Because we do so little formal meditation, might as well have it right on. Okay. So I have a question for... What was I going to ask? I think I was going to ask... Yeah, Peter. Some prompting there from partners. Peter, do you remember how many mental factors there are?
51.
And how many virtuous mental factors there are?
Yes, I do remember, but I'll have to remember from them before I remember. 11.
11. And what are they?
Oh, gosh. Do you have to go in order?
Well, sometimes people like when people do if I ask someone to enumerate the 10 paths of non-virtue, sometimes called the 10 non-virtuous acts, they'll say, let me see, lying, wrong view, instead of jumping all over. Actually, you can, if there's a certain things that you can put together, or certain ones that you can put together as pairs, for instance, shame and consideration for others. Okay. What's the first one in this list, which is usually...
Give me a hint, then I'll get on a roll. I can say the shame and the embarrassment and the non-hatred.
I have a lot of this in you.
You have a lot of what?
I have a lot of this in you. Okay, faith. Then shame and... Okay. Faith, shame, and embarrassment, or embarrassment we can call consideration for others. What other ones?
Non-attachment.
We could say the three roots of non-virtue. So then if you just think of that next, then you've got them pretty down.
Non-attachment, non-hatred, and non-ignorance.
Right? See, it's not exactly non-ignorance, but we could translate it that way. It's this one, amoha, non-bewilderment, sort of similar to non-ignorance, okay? Then, that's 6. Okay, who can help? Carrie, can you help? Brish, sister?
Enthusiasm.
So enthusiasm, which could also be called effort or enthusiastic perseverance.
Conscientiousness.
Conscientiousness, which is kind of similar to what? To shame and embarrassment, shame and consideration for others, except it doesn't take a particular reason. In fact, it's always coincident with them. So that's 8. My fingers.
Suppleness and non-violence.
Suppleness, non-violence.
Non-violence and recollection.
Is recollection one of the virtuous mental factors? What's recollection?
I can't recall.
That's one of
Very good.
the
Very clever. Recollection or mindfulness is one of the object ascertaining mental factors. Eh? So maybe equanimity? Okay, so we haven't talked about so much. We talked about suppleness or pliancy a bit last time, did we not? Or did we just get to that point? We only got up to conscientiousness. Okay. Effort. We did a lot of effort. Oh, no. Okay, that's after pliancy. After pliancy, conscientiousness. Okay, so the 10th one here, equanimity. Equanimity is not, for instance, if someone were to ask you, what's the virtuous mental factor equanimity, and you would say, well, just like to have big mind, and to be equal to everyone, nonpartisan. That's what this is, isn't it? Would that be an easy sort of general definition of this one, Venerable?
Having an even mind.
To friends, enemies, and strangers.
Towards all beings.
Is that right? Is that this virtuous mental factor?
Which is non-hatred. Don't have hatred and attachment.
No, that's not this one. The word equanimity, I'm not sure the Sanskrit, but in Tibetan we say tangyom. You can see, if you know the Tibetan, you can actually write the Tibetan from the transliteration there. You see? You like to, with your script. There's 3 meanings of equanimity. There's the equanimity which is, for instance, the equanimity of friend, enemy, and stranger. What else is there? Where else is this word tangyom used? It's used also in terms of one of the feelings. What's that feeling? That's not pleasure, that's not suffering. It's, you could call it neutral or neutrality. If you called it indifference, might have some other kind of implications to one. Like, for instance, when you feel certain feelings that you have, you can recognize quite easily as unpleasant. You don't like them. You'd rather be free of them. Others you'd think, this is not bad. I could do with some more of this. Those are pleasurable feelings. And those that, if I ask you right now, the one I've asked you before, like the tip of your right ear, provided it's not hot and burning right now, if I ask you, how does that feel? And you put your attention there, not good, not bad. It's just this feeling of equality. So that's another meaning of this tangyom. Sometimes, if you just see the word tangyom in the scriptures, the third meaning is this mental factor, the virtuous mental factor, which is not talking about equality of friend, enemy, and stranger. It's a particular mental factor that it comes in its culmination mainly in when you develop single-pointed concentration, when you develop shine, tranquil abiding, and perhaps Cerebral Rinpoche will be talking about it in the course. if you are, at a certain point at the beginning, if you don't apply the antidotes that are necessary, if your mind is beginning to sink, we get tired or dark, if you don't apply an antidote there, that's a big fault. So you have to be alert. You have to have alertness, that mental factor. What else did we call it? What was it? No? Introspection. You have to have that kind of like a mental spy to watch whether sinking or excitement are taking place. Excitement is another kind of mind opposite, another fault of concentration, where instead of the mind sinking and becoming dull and losing its grip on the object, sinking could be sometimes in an extreme form, like when you're holding your rosary at night and it falls out of your hand. You just don't have enough, you're not holding with enough tightness, or becomes unclear, could even fall into sleep. But that just in its initial points, subtle sinking even that is a fault. The other main fault is excitement. When you leave the object of meditation, mainly because of something attractive. You could scatter, you can move for other reasons also, but the other kinds of scattering, when you might lose the object of concentration because you're angry or something else, they are not as difficult to eliminate. But excitement, a particular kind of scattering, when you find something attractive, some other object attractive to your mind, and you sort of move on to that, that's the other main fault. So at the beginning you have to apply antidotes. You have to be alert, and as soon as those faults arise, you have to be able to apply the antidotes. You have to have that mental spy. What if in your Dharma center, at the beginning, maybe the group of people that you live in a house, and at first you don't know the people, so you have to be alert all the time. You're always watching whether they're in your room, taking your things. I don't know what they would take of yours, or you're watching what kind of behavior they have. Later, when you get to know them and you absolutely know them perfectly, it becomes an exhaustion to have to watch them. You can't really interact with them completely perfectly if you're constantly sort of worried about some other things. So you have to let go of that effort at a certain point. Same thing in meditation. I don't know if that's a good example, but anyway, say in meditation, at first you have to be alert whether your mind is losing its strength of clarity on the object, or that's called sinking, or whether it's scattering onto another object, mainly due to what the mental factor called excitement, which is due to some kind of attachment or something attractive. Later, when you get to the very high stages of the 9 levels of Shine, your concentration is so good, you've applied antidotes to sinking and excitement to such an extent that they no longer will occur. At that point, if you still have this guard around, it's like you're paying this watch person. I won't say watchman because we have to say watch person. What's another word? Guard. Okay, guard is gender inclusive. Sentry. Yeah, sentry. If you're paying this sentry and there's no need, you're wasting energy. Same thing, if some of your mental energy is going into watching, whether there's excitement and sinking, and there is no sinking and excitement, you're not going to be able to use that energy to make the final step to achieve tranquil abiding. So at a certain point, you have to let go of that tendency to watch for sinking and excitement and any other kind of obstacle. And that particular state of mind that lets go is called equanimity, this virtuous mental factor. Without doing that, you won't be able to achieve single-pointed concentration. You won't be able to achieve tranquil abiding. Okay, so let's see what the text says. That's just sort of general mishmash. Regarding equanimity, the Abhidharma Samuccaya, the compendium of knowledge, says, what is equanimity? It is a discordance with afflictive states. It is something which is discordant with afflictive states, an evenness of mind, a dwelling in a natural state, and a spontaneous abiding, within abiding in non-attachment, non-hatred, non-ignorance, as well as effort. It has the function of not allowing the opportunity for afflictions. So this itself, this mental factor, although at first that precise kind of definition may not have, we'll see later here how it connects with tranquil abiding. This particular mental factor actually, it says dwelling in a natural state and a spontaneous abiding. This has to do with abiding on the object without abiding in non-attach and within abiding in non-attachment. So it's sort of coincident with non-attachment, non-hatred, and non-ignorance, which are those natural states, which are kind of states similar to wisdom, that prevent the arisal of the delusions, the afflictions. As has been said above, independence on the techniques for internally settling the mind single-pointedly on an object of observation. Independence on the techniques, so Rinpoche Rinpoche will be talking about that in the weekend in the courses that are coming up on Shine, right? How to settle the mind on the object. The 9 mental abidings are gradually accomplished. So the 9 mental states, the ne can mean some place you abide or reside or just states. So there are different ones that can be differentiated by the various qualities of the concentration. If you're able to only keep your mind on the object for a moment, at least something, and then you lose it, or later you've remembered enough to bring the mind back to it quickly, kind of patch up the concentration, that constitutes another level. At certain levels, you're able to have a continuity of on the object, but you might be afflicted by sinking. Even though you've got the object, you lose your clarity of it. So there's 9 states that will be talked about when you study about tranquil abiding. So that's what's being referred to here. When the 9th is achieved, the 9th state of this level, the 9th mental state or mental abiding, one no longer needs to strive to use the antidotes to laxity and excitement, or sinking and excitement. And one attains a spontaneous abiding of the mind. So that's what's referred to as this mental factor. In general, there are 3 types of equanimity. Compositional equanimity, equanimity which is a feeling, and immeasurable equanimity. So what does it mean, compositional equanimity? Do you have any idea? It's compositional factor. That means it's a mental factor, equanimity. Equanimity, which is a feeling, we just talked about that earlier, right? Which is the in-between pleasure and unpleasant. And immeasurable equanimity. You know, that's like the one that Venerable was kindly reminding us of out of her kindness. Okay? From among these 3, the mental factor here is compositional equanimity. With regard to this, one should understand the following in detail from the stages of the path to enlightenment. That means the 9, the Lanrim Chemo, right? I was the 9, in the footnote here, it says the 9 mental abidings are setting the mind, or settling the mind, continuous settling, resetting, close setting, disciplining, pacifying, you notice I'm getting higher, thorough pacifying, making one pointed, and setting in equipoise. That's the top. So what you're supposed to know from the Lanrim Chemo is the system of setting the mind on the object of observation on the occasion of the first mental abiding. So that will take place in the seminar over the weekend, right? In the coming weeks. The system of relying upon the antidotes to laxity and excitement up to the system of increasing abiding on the object of observation. So there are various antidotes to laxity and excitement. So you need to know those at first. If you don't apply them, Those are the faults. Remember what the faults were? Did Rinpoche mention? There were 5 faults. First one was laziness. And we talked about that. It had how many antidotes? 4, which were faith, giving rise to aspiration, giving rise to effort, giving rise to pliancy or flexibility. So that takes care of 4. And then the other 4 each have 1 antidote. So there are 8 antidotes to the 5 faults. So the next fault was what? Is it forgetting the oral instruction? Okay, I mean, it's not just you can't even remember what your object is. And then what was there then? What's the antidote to? Pardon? Watchdog mind. Developing mindfulness of the object, that is, finding the object of observation and being mindful of it. Third fault was what? Those are the faults. 4th fault? Are those a fault or? It's a 4th. Well, are laxity and excitement separate ones?
No, they put them together.
Yeah? Yeah. Over-application, that would mean, and what? Or say non-application would be one, right? Over-application. How is non-application related with laxity and excitement? Isn't not recognizing laxity and excitement? Anyway, we'll see in the course. So these are the 5 faults. So right here we're talking about the equanimity is the sort of the antidote to over-application, the last fault. When you're applying some effort, rather than not applying enough effort, when you don't need to any longer, on the ninth mental abiding. And you're supposed to know from the Lanrim Chemo, at those times, the system of relying on the antidotes to laxity and excitement. Finally, the system of achieving single-pointed abiding and meditative stabilization. Should know the demarcation between whether or not it is necessary to be on the alert for laxity and excitement. So that, when do you don't need to be on the alert for laxity and excitement? When there's no one around checking on you? Then you can take it easy? No, it means when you've conquered sinking and excitement. The system, and you should know the system for attaining equanimity and so forth. So the function of equanimity is specified as not allowing an opportunity for afflictions, because upon attaining the 9th mental abiding, the manifest afflictions of the desire realm are easily overcome, and in particular, laxity and excitement do not arise during meditative equipoise. So if you are like me and have lots of afflictions, you can kind of develop some aspiration to develop single-pointed concentration, because even without realizing emptiness, just developing single-pointed concentration, your mind is separated from the desire realm mind and from the delusions, the afflictions of the desire realm. And it's a much more supple kind of mind. It doesn't mean that and by separated, it means, as it says here, the desire realm afflictions are non-manifest at that point when you're in that equipoise. So all of your depression would be gone. Could you have depression if you had single-pointed concentration? It'd be contradictory. You couldn't have that. If you're plagued by depression or strong desires, unfulfilled desires, or anger, develop single-pointed concentration. That is itself can act as an antidote to those. Yeah. So then, the 11th. Here it says non-harmfulness. How else do we know this one? This is nampar misewa, which is in, what is it in Sanskrit? Does anyone know? What did Gandhi, what was the famous principle of Gandhi? Ahimsa. The negative particle, himsa. Nampar mi sewa, mi is a negative particle, so that's the ahimsa. Ahimsa is usually in Gandhi and people that followed Martin Luther King, which is in the West we call it non-violence. So this is exactly that same word. So you could translate it instead of non-harmfulness, non-violence. So regarding non-violence, the Abhidharma Samachaya, the Compendium of Knowledge, says, what is non-violence? What is ahimsa, or nampar mesewa? It is a mind of compassion and is involved with non-hatred. It has the function of not inflicting injury. You don't like that? You don't think it's good? It is a mind of compassion, non-violence. So this may be different what you think of the dictionary. This is talking about the Buddhist meaning of the word. It's not talking about what you might think Gandhi meant by it or Martin Luther King.
I was just thinking that the word like non-harm might be more accurate than non-violence, because in Sanskrit, ahimsa is ensuring that no further harm will come to something. It may call for some type of so-called like injury may be caused to someone if they're causing more injury to another person.
I'm saying what we know in the West, this word that's become popular in the West, usually when you talk about Gandhi usually and those kind of actions, don't they usually call it nonviolence? That's what I'm saying. The same thing, like for instance, the one that we talked about, discrimination. In some cases, it's better to call it discernment, or when we talked about the six recognition, like the six recognitions, recognizing yourself as the patient and so forth. Remember at the beginning of the course? To call them the six discernments in that case, or the six discriminations, sounds a little bit awkward. So the same thing here, the word non-harmfulness may be very appropriate in some contexts, but to keep it in your mind / nonviolence, because in other contexts, nonviolence may be more tasty. Okay? So this is coincident with compassion. Which of the mental factors, the virtuous mental factors, was coincident with love? How many seconds it takes? Embarrassment. Okay. So when you have embarrassment, you're in love.
No, there's one
I'm
about
joking.
not causing harm. Non-hatred.
Non-hatred. Non-hatred is coincident with love. So that and this mind, non-harmfulness, are very similar, but yet still different. What's the difference between compassion and love? What's your name? Lindy. What's the difference between compassion and love?
I think compassion, I don't know, to me connotates more of an understanding and a balance.
So I should have said, what does compassion and love mean in Buddhism? Because we all have our own. I say, to me, I'm sorry. I should have phrased it. Do you have any idea what it means? What they mean in Buddhism? Are they the same? Are they different? Maybe you haven't had a chance to.
I think to have compassion, you have to start with love.
Okay. To have compassion, you have to start with love. Who knows? It's very. Your name was Mark. Mark. Yeah, right. Mark. Yeah, sorry.
Compassion
I should
is.
remember that.
Compassion is seeing the suffering of all sentient beings, and love is the desire to free all sentient beings from that suffering.
Oh, that's interesting. Suffering is seeing, suffering. Compassion is seeing the suffering of sentient beings, being aware of it, all sentient beings, and love is wanting to free them from it. Does anyone want to debate with that?
See the object of your love be happy, and compassion is wanting to remove their suffering.
And?
compassion is wanting to remove their suffering.
Yeah. So, first of all, it doesn't have to, love and compassion don't have to take all living beings, all sentient beings as their object. When we talk about great compassion or great love, Maha Karuna or Maha Maitreya, maybe it could include all, but it doesn't have to take that. And they have, it's not just seeing the suffering of others, compassion, it is, as Don has recalled, it's the desire to free others or another from some suffering. That, like, say for instance, you see a child that's suffering, the heartfelt wish that they be free of that, wishing that they be free of that, would be called compassion. Love is like the other side of a coin. If you have compassion, you'll have the capacity for love, but it may not be manifest at the same time. Love is a state of mind that's perceiving the object and wanting it to be conjoined with happiness. Wanting it, like say the child, one moment it's crying and you want it to be free of that, and also you're wanting it to be happy. Can they be present at the same time? Love and compassion? Or would they have to alternate, like hatred and attachment and so forth? What do you think, Lisa?
It seems as though if you want someone to be free of suffering, then naturally they're going to be happy. So it seems like it's the same thing.
Remember, according to...
Lack of suffering would be happiness.
Remember when we talked about, even if you realize something manifestly, directly, you might realize some other things indirectly, but they're not appearing to you. So you might say, maybe one of them, if one of them's present, the other is implicit at that time, but it may not be manifest. Not sure. Here in the definition it says, it's a mind of compassion and is involved with non-hatred. Now I'm not sure, I don't have I didn't bring the text with me, I didn't check what the word involved is in Tibetan. You might sort of think about it. Can love and compassion be manifest simultaneously? Because they have different aspects, different ways of looking at the object. One of them wants the object to be free of suffering. One wants the object to be endowed with happiness. So when we talked about the mind and mental factors, we talked about there could only be, that there would be one mode of apprehension, So you have to think about that. Maybe there could be two streams of consciousness, who knows? But anyway, so it's something to think about. This one, Nampar Mitsewa, or Ahimsa, whether you call it nonviolence or non-harmfulness, is different than non-hatred. Non-hatred is specifically of the nature of love. It acts as an antidote. It wants others to be happy. This is something that sort of hesitates, doesn't want others to suffer. They're very, very similar. I like to think of like two sides of a coin, but different. They're showing different faces. What do the Italians say? The two faces of the medallion. Very Roman. As has been said above, non-harmfulness is a patience that, lacking malice. What is malice? Maliciousness. Not wishing harm?
No, wishing.
Wishing harm. Yeah. I hope they fall down the stairs. They make a fool of themselves, and they'll get it. So malice, maliciousness, is that, if that's the word that we usually translate as malice, is that one of the, where do you know that from? From the 10 paths of non-virtue, right? It's one of the actions of non-virtuous actions of mind. So what are they? Covetousness, malice, and wrong view. So malice is kind of like a state of hatred which is intense and it's really made up its mind someone else should suffer. So this is a patience that lacking malice, observe sentient beings thinking, may they be free of that. It means suffering. This abandoning harm to sentient beings, or non-harmfulness or non-violence, is the essence of the meaning of the Conqueror's scriptures. So many things it said, this is the essence of the... So what do you think? There's many essences? Well, really, on the conventional level, so we can say all of the Buddhist teachings finally could be included in method and wisdom. Method is the Buddha's techniques of how to deal with relative truth. The supreme methods being what? Bodhicitta, renunciation, bodhicitta, is a non-attachment, then bodhicitta, then even in Tantra, different kinds of methods, bliss and so forth, illusory body, different things. Wisdom is how to deal with ultimate reality. That is, how one cognizes it, how one ascertains and how has that coolness of mind. So, in a sense, all of the compassion is the starting point to develop bodhicitta, this kind of, in the sutra system, the ultimate kind of method. It's praised again and again because even the bodhisattvas who begin to develop bodhicitta, even if you have a little inkling of bodhicitta, you have to increase that by cultivating and enhancing your compassion for others. So it's kind of like as I said here, the essence of the meaning of the Conqueror's scriptures. Here's a famous quotation. Patience is the supreme austerity, the best of austere or ascetic practices, to be patient. The Buddha said, patience is supreme nirvana. An ordained one who harms or injures another is not a trainee in virtue. Non-harmfulness. Even the Conqueror's teaching in the context of bestowing a water strainer in the Vinaya procedural rite is a fine distinction of compassion, and a example of that. Where did you get a water strainer? Where's your water strainer, Venerable?
I don't know if Dreamy actually gave me one, but I'm sure she told me about it. I mean, definitely talked about it.
So in the ritual, when one takes ordination, one is given various things, at least symbolically, and one of them is a strainer, because in the time of the Buddha, now you get we can still have kind of microbes in our water, but you can't filter those out with an ordinary water strainer. The Buddha said you should check the water when you take it at the top, in the middle, and at the bottom before you drink it. The same way when you sit down, you should check so you're not sitting on something. And to do that, to protect that your water, that you weren't harming insects or little worms that might be in the water. Like I remember when we lived in Nepal at Kopan, in the water jugs, because they were just big earthen jugs outside, there would be sometimes little larvae or something floating around. So to avoid harming them, to filter the water, first of all. I have to say that as my eyes get worse, I have to every time I go to the kitchen, I have to put on my glasses now to avoid harming. Because if I wash off the countertop, there can be some ants there, and if I don't have my glasses on, they just looks like a piece of coffee grind or something, and then you have to be careful. So this is talking about the water strainer, the bestowal of the water strainer in the rite of taking ordination. Since one must definitely turn away from harming others as well as their bases. What does that mean, their bases? It means their bodies, I guess. Because is the person the body, Mark? No? The person is the mind?
No.
Well, what's the person then?
The person doesn't exist.
Person doesn't exist. So Mark doesn't exist.
Conventionally, Mark exists.
Well, you just said the person didn't exist. Excuse me.
Ultimately, Mark doesn't
Ultimately, Mark doesn't
exist.
exist. Okay.
Yes, okay.
So ultimately Mark doesn't exist, but conventionally Mark does exist?
Yeah.
So conventionally Mark is the mind or the body?
Conventionally,
Because Mark exists conventionally, you said, right?
right.
So conventionally Mark is the body?
Conventionally, Mark would be what we would call the collection of aggregates.
Okay, so what kind of, what tenet holder is Mark? You who are taking tenets. He says Mark is the collection of aggregates. Maybe you say the mere collection of aggregates. He must be like a Vaibhashika or something, right? Okay. He's kind of holding Vaibhashika tenets. So what would you say? Well, we would say to you, if you have a chance to study tenets, you'd see that even all the tenets say that the person is just imputed, is just the being, the Purusha or Kebu in Tibetan, we say, imputed upon the five aggregates. So in Prasangika, especially the highest philosophical school, Mark does exist conventionally, you can say that, and Mark does not exist ultimately, that's true, but conventionally, how does it exist? It's not the body, as you said, it's not the mind, it's the mere name that we impute to the body and mind upon the basis of the five aggregates. So it says, so besides the basis here it said, since one must definitely turn away from harming others as well as their bases, the necessity of equipping oneself with a strainer for the sake of abandoning harm to creatures and water has been taught. On the occasion of giving the instruction, one is cautioned about the necessity to abide in the four qualities that make one a trainee in virtue. So do you know these four? This is good. Even when derided, not to deride in return. Okay, to insulted. If someone insults me, I just say, well, you're worse. If someone insults us, we get them back, right? Double. Well, you're worse. Well, who do you think you are? If someone gets angry at one does not get angry in return. Even when hit, one does not hit back. Even when one's faults are exposed, do not expose the faults of others. So these are called the four activities of an ascetic, someone who's trainee in virtue. Good advice, huh? Okay. So this is very famous. So if you have certain things that you like to remember, this is a good one, and try to practice. When others insult you or criticize you, could maybe say criticize. When others criticize you, not to hold your tongue, not to criticize back. You think? Okay, easy to do. Mothers and daughters, fathers and daughters, whatever. Even when someone gets angry at you, don't get angry in return. Just remain calm. Even when hit, when someone hits you, do you hit them back? Every time. It's a certain kind of mentality. When you're kids, you always do. If your brother hits you, you hit them back, right? So we think that may seem gross. And if someone exposes your faults, tells about your faults in public, not to then expose theirs in return. Therefore, if the intelligent ones analyze and understand this well, they will be able to understand that abandoning harmfulness is the essence of the teachings. Who are the intelligent ones? It just means intelligent ones in general? Lodan Demba, intelligent ones is a synonym for bodhisattvas, so it kind of means those who are high faculty, bodhisattvas. So now, here's some discussion of the category. It's not, that heading is not part of the text, but now it comes. A question comes up in the mind. With regard to virtue, are the 11 virtuous mental factors which have been explained here exhaustive? What does that mean? If you do them, you get totally tired? Is that what that means? No, what does that mean? Yeah, complete. Maybe there's more. Are there more? Is that exhaust all the possible ones? Is that response? In general, virtues are taught to be of 5 types. Virtues by way of entity. So these are examples of that. Things that by their entity, they are virtuous. Their presence, they are virtuous. Virtue by way of relation, for instance, the other mental factor, like say, remember the mental factor sempa, or intention? Is that virtuous by its nature? It's not a virtuous mental factor. It's a, what is it? Omnipresent mental factor, but it becomes virtuous in relationship to being in a mind, in relationship to a mind which is virtue, when one of these virtuous mental factors is there. Virtues by way of subsequent relation. Here it says, virtues by way of subsequent relation are imprints of virtue. Virtue by way of motivation. So sometimes if you've motivated virtuously at the beginning of an activity, even if your concentration wavers and during the activity it is not, you haven't sustained that, still the action can be virtuous by the force of your motivation. That's why we try to motivate at the beginning. Motivation is very, very important. There's two kinds of factors that determine the virtue of an activity. The motivation, the preceding motivation, and the concomitant or the temporal, during the activity, whether the entity of the mind is virtuous or not. It's like this. If you start a car rolling, by the inertia of that, it keeps going in a certain direction. So if you've started an activity with a virtuous motivation, even if your mind becomes a little bit distracted, like you're making prostrations, try to motivate at the beginning, then even if your mind becomes distracted, that whole activity, by the force of your motivation at the beginning, becomes virtuous. What do you think, Mo? Does that make sense? I notice you taking frantic notes there. Does that make sense?
Right. It does make sense because we motivate all the time, and that really helps me understand why that's so important.
That itself, even if during the middle of the, here you might even get angry, during the middle of the class, or your distracted mind or whatever. But by the fact of, I'm going to do this activity in order to clear my mind, to develop wisdom so I'm less harm to others, I'm less needy, I have more time for others, I can develop love and compassion, I can ultimately attain enlightenment. For that reason, I'm going to do this. Now I'm going to do this. So by that motivation, the whole activity can become virtuous. This is very important.
Help you come back also to that place.
Where's that, Missouri?
Well, yes, to Missouri. Now, does the motivation, like, say you get angry in the middle?
Yeah.
I don't know what you're doing, frustrations, you get angry about something.
Well, it was extreme.
But
I was just saying, if you got angry at me, I was using that as an
well,
example. Because I could see many people getting angry at me.
Then does the motivation kind of carry you? Is that what you're saying? It carries?
Well, that's an extreme example. That might still, let's say if the mind becomes distracted, I don't know, if you really got really angry, you can sort of, still, the reason that you were engaging in this action, the whole thing is sort of encompassed by, encapsulated by that motivation. And so it has a certain kind of flavor due to the sort of encompassing the whole thing. That's what set it into motion. So say, for instance, like bodhisattvas, at the time of birth, think, even in the bardo saying, some of you who do practices may know, they say, I'm going to take rebirth in this fertilized egg for the welfare of sentient beings. I'm going to liberate sentient beings. Can you imagine? The whole life can become virtuous, in a sense, encapsulated by that flavor, infused with that, by that kind of motivation. So to be able to have that kind of strength of mind, that takes development of the mind over many lifetimes. And then virtue by way of ultimacy, ultimate virtue. Here that means explained to be thusness. That means emptiness, because all obscurations will be purified if one meditates within the observation of thusness. Thusness, dekonani, in Tibetan we say, is the ultimate, just is a synonym of shunyata, emptiness, the ultimate nature. Therefore, they are designated as virtues, but are not actual virtues. So this ultimate virtues are not actual virtues. When the virtues explained above are divided from the viewpoint of circumstances, there is virtue by way of attainment at birth, virtue by way of application, by way of activity, by way of benefiting, by way of bearing, being patient, by way of acting as an antidote, by way of pacification, by way of concordant cause. Let's take a little break and come back in a second. So let's skip over the examples on page 50 of the explanation of these different virtues. This is quite simple. And we're going to begin now the discussion of non-virtue. Sorry about that. Okay. We're experts in non-virtue. So this also has similar kinds of things. So this is quite easy to understand. So just if you can read that. What I'd like to start on page 53 are the 6 root, when we talk about non-virtue, mainly those are created by some of the root afflictions. Well, let me ask you that. The 6 root delusions, the 6 root afflictions. We talked about, remember, things are virtuous by entity. The virtuous mental factors are all by entity virtuous. How about the delusions? Are they non-virtuous by entity? What do you think, Greg?
So,
Says here they.
Why not? They're not non-virtuous? So they could be virtuous, in other words.
virtuous by nature.
Oh, they are non-virtuous. All of the 6 root delusions are necessarily non-virtuous by nature. We'll take a vote. This is how some people think the Dharma should be decided. Yeah. How many think the root delusions are necessarily non-virtuous? Raise your hand. How many think they're not necessarily non-virtuous? I'm the only one? Okay. How many think that some of the afflictions could be virtuous? You think they could be virtuous? Which one?
Doubt can be virtuous when it becomes like doubt leading toward the fact.
Well, this is deluded doubt. This is afflicted doubt. So, yeah, that kind of doubt, like in the state, which is one of the 7 ways of knowing, that could be virtuous. But this one is necessarily doubt leaning in the wrong direction. Okay, deluded doubt. Actually, they're not necessarily non-virtuous. One in particular, well, 2 in particular, ignorance and the wrong view of the transitory collection will be present in even virtuous actions, let alone neutral actions. What are they? What kind of virtues are they called? Any of the venerables know? If they're conjoined with, held by ignorance, any actions that we do, they're necessarily called damning, contaminated, afflictive, contaminated actions. Like we talk about contaminated virtue. So contaminated happiness that we experience, what we call, when we talk about the 4 Noble Truths, and we say that, there's 3 kinds of suffering, the first truth. Suffering of suffering, changeable suffering, and what? All-pervasive compounding suffering. The first is the ripening effect of negative karma, right? The second is the ripening effect of contaminated virtue. Changeable suffering is what we ordinarily call what? Pleasure. Happiness, pleasure, right? But contaminated because it's created, the cause of it was contaminated virtue. Contaminated in what sense? Because it was created while some of these afflicted minds were in not anger and attachment. Those are necessarily non-virtuous. But you could create virtue and still have the sense of ego grasping. I am doing good to this real person. I am doing this real action. I'm so great. You could be creating virtue, even if we do, ordinarily it's just contaminated virtue. and therefore it will only ripen within samsara. We can dedicate it so that it becomes a cause of our continued practice and eliminating obstacles on our path, and it can be channeled toward enlightenment like that, but it's still, the virtue itself still is contaminated. So not all of the root afflictions, they're not called the non-virtuous mental factors. The virtuous mental factors were called, how to say, they didn't put any fine line on it, just said they're virtuous. These 11, right? They're all virtuous by entity. These are not non-virtuous by entity, all of them. Some of them are. Attachment, anger, pride, doubt. And some of the views, 4 of the views, I think, are non-virtuous by entity. Let's check. So basically, they're said to be, how many root afflictions? 6 root afflictions, right? Don is on it tonight. Really, he's on a roll. There's 6 root delusions. Does that exhaust, Mark, does that exhaust all the delusions, all the afflictions, the 6 root afflictions? What other afflictions are there? What are called the secondary or proximate, or different ways you could translate it. Secondary delusions, which are kind of offshoots of those. But the 6 root delusions, 6 root afflictions, are the main ones. Sometimes they're talked, as you see, the 6th one is called afflicted views. So sometimes that's separated off. And we say that there are 5 afflicted non-views and 5 afflicted views. Because of the afflicted views, there are 5 types of views, afflicted views. We don't call them wrong views because one of those afflicted views is called wrong view. They're just called afflicted or deluded views, right? That sixth one. We could start with that one, actually. What do you think, Breach? You follow? So we separate that 6th one. We could say these 5 are non-views. 4? Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. 6. Thank you. I was thinking I had that 6-fingered hand. So we separate off this 6th view. There's 5 here. I was thinking this is 6 for some reason. Okay, we separate off the afflicted views, and we separate them into 5 parts. So then we have 5 afflicted views and 5 afflictions which are non-views. Okay, that's one way of talking about it. So sometimes we talk about 10 delusions or 10 afflictions in that sense. So the root of all of them is ignorance, or the root of all of them is one of these, of these non-views. Which one here in this line? I guess it's the 4th one. 1, 2, 3, 4. In this list, it doesn't have to. It could be first for that matter. Ignorance, marikpa, avidya, in Sanskrit. It doesn't mean not knowing. It actually is a wrong. It is like a wisdom that's looking in the wrong way. A improper kind of discriminating mind. This root kind of ignorance, that's the root of all of them, is not just simply not knowing. Oh, excuse me, I was ignorant. I didn't know. This is actually perceiving things in the wrong way. It's perceiving things to be truly existent, as though findable within their basis of designation. Those of you who are studying tenets also, that terminology you've heard recently also, right? That kind of view, that kind of mind which grasps to the self that appears to our mental consciousness as though it really existed the way that it's appearing. Assents to that, grasps to that, adheres to that. That's kind of an active, we say proactive or active kind of ignorance. It doesn't mean the ignorance which is just, well, there is a subsidiary kind of ignorance when we talk about the lower tenets especially, which is just not knowing the law of cause and effect, not knowing that one's actions can bring negative results. And because of ignorance, that kind of ignorance, you can engage in negative activities, right? Oh, kill the chicken for me, no problem, right? Not knowing that that creates negative karma. But that's not the more profound, that is a cause of creating negative actions, but that's not the primal cause. The real cause is this more fundamental kind of ignorance, which is a misapprehension, actively misapprehending things, not just being unaware of them. So that's sometimes called the root of samsara. Nagarjuna, in his fundamental wisdom, have you tracked it down yet, Median? You haven't tracked it down. Nagarjuna, in fundamental wisdom and in all the Buddhist teachings, sometimes, well, Nagarjuna mentions avidya as the root of samsara. That's the root from all the rest of the delusions come. Chandrakirti, who's a commentator of Nagarjuna's texts, said that one of the views was the root of samsara. One particular view that we call, in Tibetan we say jiksok la tawa, the view of the transitory collection. So let's talk about those first. Ignorance and the view of the transitory collection. What's the difference? What is the view of the transitory collection? Have you ever heard of that before? Don? Have you heard? Mark, you've never heard? You've heard.
Isn't that the view of the existence of the five aggregates? I'm not saying that right, but isn't the transitory collection of five aggregates?
So this view has the same name in the lower tenets, and according to them it means viewing the aggregates which are changeable and conceiving them to be a self. But that's not what in the highest philosophical school, the Prasangika, that it means. This is referring to self-grasping of persons, the wrong view of the transitory collection. In fact, there are two kinds of self-grasping of persons. I can grasp and believe in the existence of my own self-identity, right? My own ego or my own self. That is a version of self-grasping. I could also grasp in at Dorje's self. You know? Probably get kicked or something if I grasp. I didn't mean grasp that way. I can think, Dorje really exists. He really works hard. He's really so intelligent. He's so handsome. Like for instance, when we, just thinking, oh, my friend, oh, I love them so much, as though there was a real entity out there. That's also self-grasping of persons, right? When you're talking about persons. Now, this wrong view of the transitory collection, the first of the wrong views, or first of the views rather, afflicted views, between those two only is viewing your own self. Viewing your own self, which does exist, as Mark now knows, right? The self does exist, right? Mark does exist conventionally. How does it exist? As a mere name, a mere concept we impute to your body and mind. So perceiving the conventionally existent Mark or the conventionally existent, Marcy, conceiving that conventionally existent phenomena, that person, that is yourself. Say if in Marcy's continuum, conceiving of herself, I, Marcy, mom, companion, worker, American citizen, whatever she thinks, lover of dogs and wolves. Conceiving, referring to the conventionally existent Marcy, which does exist, that's the referent object. Remember when we talked in Lorig? That's the thing that you're referring to, but conceiving it as truly existent. In your own continuum. If Greg were to think of Marcy and conceive of Marcy as truly existent, that's not this example of this wrong view of the transitory collection. For Greg, that would be referring to the Greg that he thinks of himself, the Greg that is conventionally existent, merely imputed to his own aggregates, doesn't mean that he thinks of that he has to know that. Just referring to the conventionally existent Greg, but conceiving it to be truly existent, that would be the wrong view of the transitory collection in his continuum. Does it make some sense? Marcy? Can you get rid of that one? So Chandrakirti said that is the root of samsara. Is that different than, that sounds like completely different than marikpa, avidya, ignorance over here, right? That was conceiving phenomena to be truly existent.
So one's dealing, the transitory collection is dealing with the emptiness of the self, or not perceiving the emptiness of the self, and then the marikpa is not perceiving the emptiness of external phenomena? Is that the difference?
The avidya, this ignorance, you're right. This view, this afflicted view, is kind of a subset, in a sense, of this kind of ignorance. It's a particular kind of ignorance. This ignorance conceives phenomena to be truly existent. It's like an active thing. This wrong view, or this afflicted view, conceives a particular phenomena, the self of your own continuum, to be truly existent. This is from of the Madhyamaka schools, the middle way schools. This is from the view of the Prasangika school. This is the meaning. Just as Peter was recalling, the lower tenets say that the name of this view, this afflicted view, comes about because it is observing the transitory collection, which refers to the five aggregates, and conceives that to be a substantially, self-supporting, substantially existent person. So what would be the referent object there from the lower tenet's point of view? The aggregates, the collection of the aggregates. Whereas, the collection of the aggregates, is that the same as the person, the conventionally existent person? This is good. We wouldn't have been able to to analyze this detail, 2 months ago. What do you think, Karen? Are the aggregates the same or different than the conventionally existent person, the one that does exist? Are they one and the same? Are they different? Unrelated? Related?
Well, they're what the label is labeled to, but they're not the person.
They're not the person. They are the basis of designation. From the Prasangika point of view, they're the basis of designation or the basis of imputation. You can translate it different ways, right? The five aggregates are the basis upon which we give the name Karen. We give the name Carrie, On the basis of those five aggregates, we can label the person. So is the person identical with the five aggregates? No. Is it inherently different from the five aggregates? No. Is it different, conventionally different? Nominally different than the five aggregates. It's not the same as the five aggregates, but it's not truly different than the five aggregates. Because it is related, it's imputed upon them.
The illustration of the person.
That's not the same, because according to the Prasangika, the illustration, for the lower schools, there always can be found an illustration of the person within the basis of designation. Within Leo's five aggregates, we can point to something, either the collection itself, or the mental continuum, or if in the Chittamatra system, when they talk about an eighth kind of consciousness, the root, the foundation consciousness, the alaya vijnana, we could say that might be the illustration of the person, or the consciousness. No one says the body is the illustration of the person, but some of them say the continuum of the mental consciousness or whatever. But the Prasangika says none of those are actually illustration of the person. Illustration of Leo is the mere I, the mere Leo imputed upon the five aggregates. You can't find anything within the basis of designation which is an illustration of Leo. So this is quite radical.
Why isn't a vidya considered a view? Or why is it considered a non-view?
I'll have to check exactly, but there's when we talk about view in general is a particular kind of conceptual mind. Like, for instance, when we talk about right view, you know the Eightfold Noble Path? You heard of that? This is not 8. I'm sorry. Again, I'm getting wrong here. This is 5. The Eightfold Noble Path. One of them is called right view. So that doesn't mean, right view doesn't mean single-pointed concentration on emptiness. It means having the right intellectual understanding about emptiness, I understand. So we have to check in the Abhidharma. Sometimes we use the word view casually, but it has also a precise meaning in the scriptures. I'll check a little bit more. I may not be able to explain it exactly correctly right now, but there is a difference in nature between how these 5 views are from the 5 non-views. Okay, so with that in mind, let me just say that. So ignorance and the view of the transitory collection. The view of the transitory collection. You have to say all those words to get credit. If you say the transitory collection, it's not a view, is it? If you say that wrong view, that's not the name of this, because it's not a wrong view. It's an afflicted view. One of the afflicted views is called wrong view, which is what we think of in the 10 non-virtuous actions, the 10 paths of non-virtue. One of those is called wrong view. Not all of them. They're not all wrong views. They're one of them is afflicted view. So this afflicted view, the wrong view of the transitory collection, and ignorance, they themselves are not necessarily non-virtuous. They are present in our minds, because we haven't realized emptiness. They're present in all of our virtuous actions. So all of our virtuous actions are contaminated virtues. And they will bring about contaminated pleasure within cyclic existence, which is of the nature of suffering. It'll never really satisfy you. Okay, Karen, sorry, you wanted to...
Clarifying, you talked about the view of the transitory collection and self-grasping of persons, and you said there was your own self-identity and the self of others. It is the view of the transitory collection either or? No, it's only the one.
Only
okay.
The view of your own self-identity, like the root cause of our afflictions. If you look in your own mind, so there's no real contradiction between Chandrakirti and Nagarjuna. Some people say, is Chandrakirti right or is Nagarjuna right? This is like Western scholars say, well, is Chittamatra right or is Prasangika right or something? They have slightly different context and meanings. If you look in your own mind, that which which we had previously learned of in the lower tenets, the grasping to a self-supporting, substantially existent person, right? That's the major, from the lower tenets, that's the major cause that prevents us from attaining liberation, nirvana. By realizing the emptiness of a self-supporting, substantially existent person, like that sense of an ego, which is the controller, just the sense of being of not completely different entity from the aggregates, not completely identical from the aggregates, like the controller of them, like the head salesman or saleswoman. That sense of the I, recognizing that it is empty, that it doesn't exist at all, is an illusion to one's mind, like a mirage that appears but is empty of what our mind is attributing to it, some kind of reality. recognizing that is said in the lower tenets, that's the key that leads to nirvana, right? They don't talk about the emptiness of phenomena. And we don't talk about, even there, the realization of the selflessness of the person is talking about the selflessness of your own person. Okay, that you recognize that. So this is now, having been familiar with that, that's why tenets build a basis for these things. Familiar with that, then here we're talking about the view of the transitory collection is very similar to that. It's not referring to the aggregates and conceiving those aggregates as a self-supporting, substantially existent person. It's referring to the person which is imputed onto the aggregates. That's why it's called view of the transitory collection, because it's the person which is imputed on that transitory collection, takes that as the referent object, and conceives that person to be truly existent. Just as Dorji was saying, the ignorance does conceive all phenomena to be truly existent, but the view of the transitory collection is a particular variant of that that's just conceiving the self-identity to be truly existent. That, if you look at your own mind, and if you get familiar with the lower view, the sense of the ego that seems to be the head, the taster, the experiencer, the controller, me. If you then refine your view over time and you develop tranquil abiding, calm abiding, and you can see that more clearly, you see how a subtle way that it's appearing is though it seems to be appearing from its own side without being imputed. It seems like it really has an inherent existence, a true existence, an existence from its own side. That's how it seems. Then when to understand its emptiness, you have to use logical reasonings, that if it did exist that way, it would have to be findable. For instance, it would have to be either, for instance, you could say it would either have to be one with the aggregates or different than the aggregates. Remember, didn't we talk about one and different? Yeah? If something truly exists, it would have to be truly one with the aggregates or truly different than the aggregates. And once the main point is to recognize the self, because once you've recognized the way that this self seems to be truly existent, how it appears as truly existent, it's said within a week you can develop these other points. It's not difficult. That if it existed, it'd have to be either truly one with the aggregates or truly different. That's called the principle of privation. Rebbe Rinpoche will explain when he talks about the Vipassana section. Then you see it's not truly one with the aggregates. If it were truly one with the aggregates, then when this body was destroyed, the self would be destroyed. It's not truly different. Well, there's many other faults too. It's not truly different than the aggregates, because if it were truly different than the aggregates, then when someone cut you, you wouldn't say, "Oh, I'm cut," because you're truly different than the aggregates. So in a short time, one can realize the emptiness of that, and that which is appearing to your mind seemingly so real, that view, that the object of the view of the transitory collection. So that what happens, there's two things, right? There's the object. I'll use this black thing, because that's the appearance of the truly existent I. There's also the subjective aspect that's apprehending that and conceiving it to be true. Yeah, I do exist. Yeah, it's real me. You've hurt real me, or real I, love real you. Yeah. We never think imputedly existent I loves imputedly existent you. It won't cut the butter with it. Won't cut the mayonnaise either. So there's two. This does appear. There is an appearance, but like a mirage, it is empty of what it seems to be. The grasping mind the wrong view of the transitory collection is the view that's perceiving that and conceiving it to be truly existent. Going along with that. Okay? When you realize emptiness, what is overcome? Is this object overcome, or what it refers to overcome, or is the grasping to it overcome? What do you think, Greg? So this still remains. So when you're meditating on emptiness, the I still appears?
It's a difficult thing to say. Of course, the I is always there. So, I mean,
The I is always there.
Not inherently, but
If the I were always there, then the Buddha should perceive the I. Yeah. I'm talking about when one realizes emptiness. This is what we're talking, the context, right? Not our ordinary state. When you realize emptiness, what disappears? First of all, what is happening when you realize emptiness? You're developing another state of mind which is an antidote to this ignorance. This ignorance, this kind of grasping to the transitory collection, is a erroneous mind, right? It's an affliction. It's not necessarily non-virtuous, recall? Because it could be the motivating factor for our virtue. But it's a wrong mind. It's erroneous mind. It's a klesha. I'll hold the eye up here. So as you develop wisdom, this is going to be eroded. You're not going to be believing this. As you start to develop a little bit of wisdom that realizes that this is empty of what it appears to be, that there's not really a truly existent self the way that it appears, that it's not existing from its own side. You will alternate that in post-meditation by recognizing, I'm just merely imputed. I can still function. So as this wisdom grows, this ignorance decreases. When this wisdom grows that recognizes, in a meditative session, when you develop an understanding conceptually of a reasoning such as the self that appears to be truly existent, this self, the self is not truly existent because it arises in dependence upon a mind, on the five aggregates, the basis of designation, and a name given to that. It's a dependent arising. The self is not truly existent because it's a dependent arising. Then, once you've ascertained all of the factors of that logical reasoning, we said the three modes and so forth, that wisdom can dawn that a moment ago was still some ignorance, was still grasping to the self. Now, I want to keep myself black here. You think it's someone else now. You're thinking pink plastic self. So, a moment ago, you were grasping this to be really true. Ignorance was there. Then when this line of reasoning, you might have had doubts, you might have even had a, what would it be called? Even if beyond doubt, leaning in the right direction? What's the next kind of more correctly assuming consciousness, correct belief? You might even have a belief that this is empty, but it's not yet a realization of that, right? When that realization dawns that this is empty, at that moment, this ignorance lets go, and you perceive a mere vacuity. It's empty. And all you focus on at that point, single-pointedly, is on the emptiness, the mere lack of that which was previously taken to exist. It's mere non-existence, not as mere lack. The mere non-existence of that. Nothing in its place is called a non-affirming negation. Right? So this is kind of, if Lama Zopa Rinpoche were giving a course, then you would say, okay, I'll finish the 6 delusions. Because this is the basis of all of the delusions. All the secondary delusions also. Because they all come from whatever you want to call is the root of samsara, either ignorance or the view of the transitory collection. So you can take sides over the next week who you side with. Diana, who do you side with? Chandrakirti or Nagarjuna? What's the root of samsara? Is it ignorance or the view of the transitory collection?
Can I think about it for a week?
Sure. Okay. So let's take a look now at these particular, with that in mind, the first one here, attachment. Well, it's here. First of all, what does it mean to be a klesha? Or here we're translating affliction. Usually, sometimes we translated delusion before. Sometimes people translate the word that, when we talked about non-ignorance before, what I wanted to call bewilderment, sometimes people translate that moha as delusion. Okay, but here, affliction is a good one. What's the characteristic, defining characteristics? The seni. Remember we had in our Heart of Wisdom class, seni mepa makepa magakpa. Do you remember? In these 8 qualities. Were you there, Venerable? We talked in the Heart Sutra. Yeah, the last class. There's right after form is emptiness. Form is empty. Emptiness is form, and then it's the same for the other aggregates. And then in emptiness there is no form. So one of them was seni mepa, that we said defining characteristic or definition. So the general characteristic or defining characteristic of affliction is, according to the Abhidhamma Samachaya, a phenomenon such that when it arises, the characteristic of being very unpeaceful arises. So the kleshas have the tendency, in Tibetan we say nyonmong, sometimes you could call them disturbing states of mind, because what peace there was before that, or is capable, maybe there was no peace before that, in my case, but what peace there is capable of being in the mind is prevented by the occurrence of the afflictions. And due to its arising, the mental continuum arises as being very unpeaceful. So the klesha itself is unpeaceful. It is agitated. When the afflictions are present, the clarity of the mind is lost. So that's why the example is given, like when the king's horses, the horsemen run, the horse's hooves run through the mountain stream, which was before that crystal clear. All of the mud and rocks and stuff are agitated, the surface is agitated. This kind of like injecting afflictions into the mind. When the afflictions are in the mind, the mind becomes sullied. It's kind of like rising in the mind. The mind becomes unclear. Say when anger is there, it's very difficult to make the right decision. Even though you think, strike out, that's the best thing. Nuke 'em. Or when attachment is there, oh boy, very, very difficult to make the correct decision, because that is kind of like the mind has become unclear and unpeaceful and agitated. So that's a general characteristic of all of the afflictions. So when the Buddha said nirvana is peace, nirvana is a state when all of the afflictions are abandoned from the root, right? So the first here, as is said above, it is an awareness that causes the mental continuum to be very unpeaceful when it arises. So of these 6 root afflictions, the first one that's talked about here is attachment. Some people think attachment is good. They can kind of see anger is a problem, but what do you think? I forgot your name, John. What do you think? Attachment, maybe that's not quite so bad, right? As anger. Anger is a bad affliction. Attachment maybe can be okay. Attachment for your loved ones, your mom and dad, your dog, your parakeet.
Motivation for the attachment is virtuous?
Pardon me?
Is it possible that a motivation for an attachment is virtuous?
Motivation for an attachment is virtuous.
Like you're attached to your guru.
But that was he's saying something. He's not saying the attachment could be virtuous. He's saying the motivation for the attachment can be virtuous. Maybe you have to think about this a bit. what that means. So Carrie's example, say you're attached to your guru. Is that could that be virtuous? Attachment for your guru?
Depends on if you would be willing to do something bad to protect that guru or bad to...
Well, what if you weren't being, no, it wouldn't go that far, but you were attached to your guru. You had attachment for them. What does that mean? So we have to identify what attachment means. Because at first, when we're just using the word, it's unclear. This is why we're studying in depth like this. Attachment is a particular kind of state, particular mental state, which upon perceiving something which has arisen due to karma, due to your individual karma, as attractive to your aggregates, to your mind, either your mental continuum or your tongue, nice chocolate or tofu or whatever is attractive. On the basis of referring to something which is attractive like that, the mind exaggerating the qualities that are not really there, and because of that, first of all, because of what we called inappropriate attention, thinking, oh, this was it Sri Lankan mango tea? Oh, this is good. Oh, this is really good. If I had this, I'd always be happy. There's no tea better than this. If I had this, I'd, forever. That's kind of, because inappropriate attention, perceiving something as pleasant, attractive, then exaggerate, because of because of inappropriate attention, that is, attending it in the wrong way, not thinking of it as the nature of suffering, impermanent, selfless, and so forth, but thinking of it as real pleasure, permanent, so forth and so on. If I had this, I'd always be happy. I wouldn't be missing anything. I could leave other things behind. I'd have just my Sri Lankan vanilla mango tea. That, and then on the basis of that exaggeration, then the mind becomes attached to that. That's when mental factor attachment comes in. It has exaggerated the qualities of something and either wants to get it. Thea, do you have some mango tea? It's not going to be attachment. It might be some other mental factor. It's not going to be attachment. Or if you do have it, not wanting to get rid of it. Not wanting to get rid of it. Georgie wants to take my, no. Or, what's the deepest hurt? I've mentioned many times over the course of the last year what I understand to be the root words, the root of all blues music. Do you know what that phrase is? I told you. My baby left me. Chris, could you, if you had a guitar here, could you? Yeah, that would be it. My baby left me. I lost my tractor down at the diner, lost my job, my money, whatever you were attached to, if it's lost because of the attachment, that's the blues ensue, right? My baby left me. That's when the suffering comes, because of attachment. If you had no attachment, if you didn't exaggerate the qualities, oh, that should be clean. If you didn't exaggerate the qualities and you recognized that it was impermanent, it was of the nature of suffering, that you would have to be parted from it eventually, when your baby left you, you would be like the Zen, the Taoist master. There's a famous story you've heard probably in some of the texts. Taoist master, kind of Indian, Chinese. You know what Taoism is, right? Indian, Chinese religion, spiritual path, if you don't want to call it religion, talks about the Tao, the way. Taoist master lived with his wife in a hermitage for many, many years, and everyone knew they were very loving of one another. The villagers heard that his wife had died, and they thought, oh my gosh, let's go up and console him. He's probably grieving. So they went up, and he was playing the drums and drinking and having a party, and they thought, how callous at first, how callous, how unloving. He's not grieving. But actually he was showing them that you don't have to grieve. I mean, we think, even Western psychiatrists, psychologists, consider that if you don't grieve when there's a loss, when your baby leaves you, if you don't have a period of grieving, that's unhealthy. Certainly, if you have no idea about the mind, you have to, maybe you need some kind of remedial treatment like that, some sense of grieving. But to someone like this master, even celebrate that. What did Jesus say? That it's all. I didn't even say it's always darkest before the dawn. What did he say? Anyway. Who said that? Bob Dylan. Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to be blasphemous. And we find in all the traditions things like that. That you have to die before you're reborn. You have to die before you're reborn. That sounds smart. Like that's not that. Bob Dylan didn't say that. So recognizing that, sometimes when change takes place, like the Dalai Lama, he was, as he said in his own life, if a person was not spiritually advanced but held that position of reverence, being the king of this country, and then it was taken away, and one became, in one sense, such a different situation that could be totally destructive for some people. Our dear Richard Nixon, who was, excuse me, when he was, what's the word? Not exiled. Well, they attempted to impeach him, then he resigned, right? So they didn't impeach him. You could, even though he gave I don't know, how do you do the victory sign? When he was on the air, going to the airplane and looked very proud. He was incredibly depressed. He got phlebitis, sort of like, you know what phlebitis is? It's sort of a blood clot in his leg. So you could see immediately, psychosomatically, that it affected him very much. It's said that one of the greatest sufferings is the suffering of the gods when they fall, when they know the moments before death, the weeks before death in the Deva realm. The Devas have a limited clairvoyance to see where they're going to be reborn in their next life. Incredible, first of all, they start to perspire, which they never did before, which I perspire all the time, so I'm not a god of realm. Their flower garlands, garlands begin to fade. Other gods kind of avoid them. It's kind of like in the world, isn't it? Like in social circles, when you're no longer hip or something, isn't it? When you're no longer cool. The gods, it's said that the mental suffering of the Devas at that time is greater, the mental suffering is greater than the greatest physical suffering of the Avicii hell. Why? Because they've experienced this for such a long time. Because they have that, because let's talk about the gods of the desire realm. They still have desire realm attachment. Yeah, they have pride and other things. And it's incredible suffering. So attachment.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay. You want to tell a story?
Well, no, I was going to ask, I might have heard this incorrectly, but when Mahazopa Rinpoche was teaching the other week in San Francisco, and Swirl asked, do you remember the question she asked?
I remember her asking a question.
She asked,
voice right now.
She said something, I'm sure I'm getting this wrong, but something along the lines of, she asked Rinpoche, if we're to, treat all beings as if they're our mother, what if we have attachment for our mother?
Can't that induce attachment, she said.
Right, something like that. So and then he said that's great.
He said great.
If you could have attachment, well, then think of this. This is the point. What do we have attachment for? We have attachment for those things that appear to us as pleasurable. If you could have attachment for all sentient beings, the ugly, the poor, the people that are angry at you, that's great. That would be far better, even though you still have delusion attachment. That'd be far better than these other states of mind.
Necessarily brings an expectation from them. You're attached to them because
just think about it. Just think about it. First of all, what Rinpoche said, I think, has some deep meaning. But let's investigate what this mental state is again. Okay, attachment. Attachment is a mental state which is based on experiencing something which is pleasant, exaggerating its qualities, and then either wanting to get it or keep from losing it. That's kind of the basic nature of attachment. Anger, on the other hand, just talking in the same sense, anger perceives something which has been perceived as unattractive or unpleasant, exaggerates the faults of that, and what? Wants to get it? Wants to either eliminate it or, to prevent its occurrence again. And so that can then motivate other things like malicious behavior, spite, other kinds of things. It can cause you to physically then, out of anger, kill, steal, lie, different things like that. So those two states of mind, attachment is not just feeling sympathy for someone or wanting to be close to your lama. Who had talked about Kiri? So if you had attachment for your lama, that's different than having respect and veneration for them. It's a different mental factor. You can have respect and veneration and be very attached to them, or you can have respect and veneration and have no attachment, to have the mental factor non-attachment, which is an antidote of attachment. That doesn't mean, oftentimes we think that would be very sort of unhuman not to have attachment.
I think sometimes we confuse them.
Maybe.
Or I was thinking about Rinpoche says, more like feeling close to someone, in your heart, but not attached. It's different.
Well, yeah, that's why I said you have to think about whether if you could have attachment for all beings, that would be quite remarkable. Because we don't have attachment. If you encounter someone that's unpleasant, you don't have attachment for them. You only have attachment for those people that somehow, because they've said something nice to you, you check, oh, they like me, or they're my friend, they'll do something for me, Or, I find them pleasant somehow. We have attachment for them. We don't have attachment for everyone. That's what Rinpoche, you have to think about what he was saying. So let's see what the text actually says here. So it's quoting again from the Abhidharma Samachaya. What is attachment? It is a clinging of the three realms. It has the function of producing suffering. It sounds like, Yoda, right? What did he say? Did you see that one? Okay, it doesn't matter. You watch. The next time you see Star Wars, you'll see if... Just as been said above, it is a mental factor that perceives a contaminated thing to be attractive by way of its own entity and thereupon seeks it. Do you see the connection of what we're saying? It perceives a contaminated thing to be attractive by way of its own entity. So in other words, it's exaggerating the qualities of something. If phenomena have qualities, those qualities exist merely as imputations. They don't exist by means of by the nature of the object. Some people find Richard Gere incredibly, naturally, by nature, attractive. If sometimes in meditation course, especially in Japan, when I mention, imagine embracing Richard Gere, and then in the back of the room, I heard something. Ah. Other people would find it totally, Richard Gere totally unattractive. I don't even mean the same gender, a different gender. So there's nothing, for a work of art. I think I've told you before, a friend of mine in Switzerland, after a meditation course that I taught at the border between Italy and Switzerland, I mentioned that all of the things that we call samsaric happiness are of the nature of suffering. They can't really satisfy you. They're not real happiness, right? Contaminated happiness. And afterwards, she was a little bit annoyed because her husband, and she owned two of the largest art galleries in, Bern, Switzerland, Zurich area, famous, so much money and art and everything. And she said, "Oh, George, you just don't understand. That is real pleasure, to see great art or to listen to great music." Now, some people would say that because compared to ordinary pleasures of the senses, the pleasure that people get from rooting for their football team or eating or sexual pleasure, which can also obviously be attractive to intellectuals also, but in some intellectuals, it's almost like the form. Turn the camera there for a second.
She asked me a long time ago not to ever point the camera at her.
Okay. I'll just describe. She has a nice shade of crimson. Say, like the form realm gods, or if we develop single-pointed concentration and we remove our mind from the desire realm, even sexual attraction can be diminished, because in the form realm there's not that same kind of lust, the same kind of attraction. It's more aesthetic, more intellectual. So almost like you can imagine the pleasures of the form realm, like pleasure of playing chess or listening to music or whatever. That's a little closer to that, although that wouldn't be necessarily the form realm pleasures. But even those, if you brought a great work of art or played a great music before a native, an aboriginal, who had never encountered these things, they would. What was the David Bowie movie about the Coke bottle? Do you remember that one?
God must be crazy.
The gods what? The gods must be crazy? Something like that. So, I mean, they didn't know what this was. They thought it was some thing of the gods. They might find this Rembrandt painting a perfect thing to have their meals on and to mix their dough on or something like that. They don't. You put a dog before a Rembrandt, a Renoir. They just, I don't know. It'd be the amazing dog that actually goes to the gallery, and you can almost imagine. That would be very unusual. So basically, let's stop there, and we'll continue next time. Why don't you try to read this section on the afflictions, starting with attachment, anger, ignorance, pride, deluded doubt, afflicted doubt. Those are the 5 non-views, and then the views, the afflicted views, starting with the view of the transitory collection and going up to wrong view. Read those, get familiar with those, and next time we'll go into more detail. All of them take as their root ignorance, from the Prasangika point of view, ignorance or the view of the transitory collection. So I think it's good. I think the discussion that we've had, and we can have at this level with some background, if you had been sitting into this discussion a year ago or 6 months ago, some of you who've studied, I think your understanding would have been far different. I think you can start to appreciate now, and it's very beneficial. So let's dedicate the merits that we've created. Recognizing that at the beginning, we did create a virtuous motivation, which was sort of the envelope that colored and encapsulated this activity of listening, participating in the class tonight. And so that we created some roots of virtue. We might have had even temporal moments of virtuous thoughts independent of that. Some insights during the class created virtue. Due to these virtuous deeds, karmic imprints have been left on my mind, which will definitely ripen within cyclic existence as contaminated pleasure. Let me dedicate them so that they're not simply exhausted as ordinary virtues might be upon their ripening, but dedicate them in such a way, may they become the cause, cumulatively, over time, of my achieving the two bodhicittas, the conventional mind of bodhicitta, the altruistic mind wishing to set all living beings in happiness, to achieve the mind wishing to achieve Buddhahood for the sake of all living beings. And the ultimate bodhicitta, may these become the cause of my realizing emptiness, the emptiness of true existence, overcoming ignorance, marikpa, overcoming the view of the transitory collection, grasping to the I, which is the most sort of sensitive thing that creates our delusions. It's that which gives rise immediately to anger, to attachment, the I, the sense of I. Due to these merits, may it become causes of developing those realizations and achieving enlightenment thereby for the sake of all sentient beings. And then try to seal that within the emptiness of the three spheres. These merits that have been created are only nominally existent, only imputed. They cannot be found anywhere in what I think of as the basis of designation of the merits. The activity of dedicating can't be found anywhere on any of its parts. The act of dedicating, thinking, may these merits ripen in this way, is merely a name. As is the state of enlightenment, developing these two bodhicittas, bringing about my enlightenment. Although these can arise as dependent arisings, they have no existence as they appear to our minds now, conceptually. They have no existence from their own side. The only existence which is valid is their conventional existence as being mere imputations. They're empty of any true existence. But still they function.